all at one time. So with that said, I'll do some really brief introductions. You obviously know who these people are, otherwise you wouldn't be here. This is Crinacle, Resolve, Jude, and Zeos. And having said that, let's start with the first question, which actually will be mine, moderator's privilege. What is the best in show for you?
Wait, do we use this?
Yeah. You'll have to share.
Check. Oh.
Simple is the one that most people won't get to hear because it's by appointment only, and that's the HE1.
I've tried it like multiple times because Singapore has an actual public demo in it. I'm privileged, I know.
So for me, best in show, I'm gonna be super cheesy and say it's all of you fine people. No, okay, I'm kidding. Best in show is for me was the L700. And some of the other stacks, E-stats that they had off of the Red Cayman, I think it's called, in that room where they had all the crazy stuff. So those ones for me were the best in the show.
I haven't really listened to anything much yet because I've only just started walking the show today. So what I heard was the new head amp, flagship amp, with a Hi-Fi Man Shangri-La Senior headphone. That was pretty incredible. Yeah, that's really incredible. And then I only heard it briefly. I know they have an HE1 upstairs. We have one at the office. That is my favorite headphone of all time. Yeah.
Atrium Closeback I listened to first, and that was a mistake because it's Atrium Closeback. However, there is a hidden secret $9,000 Audio Technica that you can't buy, so don't bother. But because they're literally sold out, they can't buy it. But that's the best Audio Technica I've ever heard, and you can't buy it, so too bad. Also, I really like the what's the new Hi-Fi amplifier? EF600, yeah. They're all too many numbers, but yeah, I really like the way that thing sounds. But not on the Hi-Fi headphones, honestly. Other things, it sounds great. Hi-Fi headphones, it sounds okay.
Okay, questions?
My question doesn't have to do with any equipment whatsoever, but I am curious. Do you know what percentage of people who listen to music primarily through headphones? I assume it's growing, and do you think that the industry is going to move in the direction of creating, dedicated headphone mixes? Not just, you can do it through spatial audio, but there are simpler ways to create a headphone mix that doesn't require, additional software. I know some artists have done binaural mixes, but do you have any sense in it? Do you guys ever talk with people in the music industry about demand for that?
I think obviously in this crowd, you're going to have a higher percentage of people who listen primarily through headphones, but it seems to be where most people are going. Dedicated 2-channel systems are becoming increasingly, I think, uncommon. As for the recordings, I was just talking to David Chesky, who's here, if you guys have seen him, and he wants to do, say, for example, binaural concerts. I'm not sure if you guys would be open to doing that. He's actually curious to know if you guys would be interested. Would you be interested in that?
Yes.
Yeah, he was curious to know if you'd be interested in binaural concerts, so I might as well ask you since you're here. So it looks like there's a lot of nodding heads. I think we're good. All right.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I guess the one thing is that you can see from stuff like Apple spatial audio that a lot of people are trying to cater towards the headphone people because let's face it, not a lot of people actually use speakers. Not because that it's inferior, but simply because of convenience, right? You go on a train, you use earphones or headphones, and it's only a very small percentage of the time, hopefully a small percent of the time, where you're just at home just listening to speakers. If not elsewhere, if you're at work, you're using headphones. If you're on Mongolia, you're using headphones. So it only makes sense to cater to the people that use it the most, right? But then again, the industry usually mixes on 2-channel, and therefore you get mixes that are catered to 2-channel. It's a circular problem. You can't really stop it.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's a lot of the stuff that people are listening to isn't necessarily brand new stuff. There's still some of us who listen to the older stuff as well. So we sort of have to deal with it, I guess. But I do think that it's, you know, as what I think what you're saying, chess stuff, binaural stuff, that would be awesome if there was more of that.
Yeah, I think technology is making bigger strides in the small things. IEMs every year. IEMs every year are better and better, are twice as good as they were last year and half as expensive.
It is, yeah.
Headphones, we're
Stagnating.
not stuck, but I mean,
Stagnating.
there's only so much you can do. I mean, like some of the things like the Meze 109s that come out, it's a relatively affordable $700 headphone, but it's tuned perfectly, it's beautifully built, so I could live with that. But in the end of the day, I'm gonna wanna listen to speakers. Personally, if I had to only have one, it'd be speakers. Do I think IMs can produce sound better? Yes, but I'd rather listen to speakers. And as far as a binaural recorded live concert or whatever you were describing, give me the tickets now.
Okay, because I know it's going to be maybe a while before we get an actual video of this, what are your initial impressions of the Yamaha 5000 series?
Never got a chance.
Yeah, I heard it. Oh, I'm the only one who heard it?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Far off.
Okay, so I don't know if they're worth $5,000, but the pad swap made such a huge difference, which is weird because they're literally an open back cup. I feel like if they had like 3 or 4 more pads to try out, they might be somewhere near the worth of a $5,000 headphone. They're beautifully built, obviously, but I think Yamaha hasn't made what's the last Yamaha headphone that we've had in the States that has been even close to this sort of price range? I don't think the one exists.
I mean, the latest ones like the IEMs, the EPH.
Yeah, we've got so much other stuff that sits there from Abyss and from Meze that's like, they're coming into a very crowded marketplace, and I don't know if this is the one. I think next year, maybe if they have another revision, they'd be able to like hammer it down. Because it feels like they're just taking the final D8000s and just making it further away and saying it's better. And we're not there yet.
Were they 2 usable signatures?
Well, no, the person who was showing them literally said, "You want to hear the bad pads or the good pads?" So there was pads that were V-shaped, just like, here's all the treble in the world and oh my god bass, or one that's like the opposite, which is just mid-range hump. And it's like, if there's something in between, if they could balance that out, it would be a fantastic headphone for staging. But it just isn't there yet.
Look at Zeos talking about frequency responses.
You don't know, I don't know what any of this is.
As far as, we've all walked around the show for 2 days and heard a bunch of stuff, and you guys have a million videos of all different stuff too. If you had to pick a favorite, like an ideal chain, DAC amp headphone from the pros, what would that be?
I'm thinking.
I'm thinking about it from the bottom up.
The question is, like an ideal chain, headphones, DAC, amp.
Yeah, DAC amp headphone, what would that be?
It would end, for me, it would end in the
So
H1.
the question is, yeah. I think like, did Constantine hold up a Qlix 5K? Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how many Sennheiser HD 600s I could buy with whatever your guys' picks are, but
HE1 is
HE1 probably, yeah, probably HE1, yeah.
Yeah, slightly more interesting answer.
Okay, slightly more interesting answer. Okay, if that's too boring.
Maybe one you have, like your favorite at home.
I don't actually own headphones. Favorite at home. Favorite at home would be, I don't know, I quite like this Aspara. I think it sounds pretty good. And then for an amplifier, I like the Zeos HM1 because you can, the shelf functions are fun, and it's got an AV for DAC inputs, which is fun. And then for the DAC, I don't care. I like the Matrix X Saber Pro because it looks nice.
cool.
Oh, yeah, for me it would end in an HE1. And then I don't use the internal DAC. So we use either usually the DCS Lena DAC or a Cord Dave, which is at the office. And then at home I use a Cord Hugo TT2 with the M scaler. That's pretty much on my desk most of the time. And then as for headphones I've been listening to, I've really been enjoying for the last couple months, the ZMF Atrium is a really lovely headphone for listening to music. The open one. So that's for me. I've enjoyed that.
All right, Geshelli Labs DAC, $200, perfectly fine. I like Spitiv anyway. You ever hear of the Rebel amp?
Oh yeah, it's dope.
Class A, Ukrainian made, $500. Oh, it was, now it's like 600. But that thing is just warm on top of warm. And then I'm gonna go against my normal judgment. It's gonna be a $2,000 headphone, the Meze Lyric, the close back. They're just lovely. They're like sitting in the back of a Maybach, and I've never been in the back of a Maybach, but I imagine that's what it's like. Meze Lyric.
Oh, that one.
Close back. The close back, yeah.
Rebel Amp's also weirdly good with IMs. It's pretty.
Oh no, Rebel Amp is amazing. It's cheap and good, and then just like a sofa to sit on.
Yeah.
I just want to disappear. I want the music to be so warm I sleep. That's perfect.
I don't know if this world can handle other Zeos disappears.
You look at mine.
I think it's still mine. I'm much more of a practical man. So I'll just tell you what I use on a day-to-day basis. If I'm not using my speakers, I am using the HD 800S. And I have it plugged to an A90, not because I like the A90, a lot of people give me flack for that, but because I can easily switch between my speakers and my headphones. Just flick it like, oh, preamp, there, headphone amp, there, easy. That's why I use it. So I have it plugged to a Motu, that's like kind of my measurement rig slash, because I do have it hooked up to a 1704, that's like nerd talk for some component big box thing. And then just, just whenever I just like flick it like, okay, whenever I'm like work mode. When I'm on like enjoyment mode, just flick it down, That's the way I like it. 2 separate folks.
So I had a question on related to custom IEMs. What do you see as kind of the best like new technology or new thing coming out in IEMs? And okay, I have 2 questions. And what do you think about bone induction?
Oh, okay. So
you can custom in your like the mold, like the
Just in IEMs, but yes.
So for bone let's start with the bone conduction thing. From what I know is that a lot of current bone conduction uses piezoelectric drivers, and for whatever, is it? No?
There's a lot of electrodynamics.
Electrodynamics. But for whatever reason, the ones that are currently being in use, I don't feel it as much. And or at least my litmus test is simple. Play music, I hold it in my hand, do I feel anything? And usually the answer is no. But I do have some interesting, I was actually talking to Joseph Mo from Joe Mo Audio. He has a new haptic feedback thing. And it's basically, he has an electrodynamic bone conduction driver that's basically just a coil attached to the shell. And yeah, I do actually feel something from that. But that kind of bone conduction is not being used in things like, I don't name brands, but I have to. It's like Unique Melody, Empire Years, all the usual stuff. And sorry, the new technology that's currently coming out, I mean, the most recent one would be ESTs.
What's it?
Oh, MEMS. It's MEMS, but I do have some criticisms of it because it's like they are fully reliant on DSP. So it's, but whether or not it sounds great, I still haven't tested it. I'm sorry, Michael, if you're here. But yes, I'm still working on trying to see if MEMS is truly the next boost up in technology. But the problem with MEMS is, yes, you can't just shove it into a quad grid like IEM, right? So it's not really, it's a different category altogether. Custom IEM, still my favorite would be just a plain like either BA DD or even pure BA. So that's like Viento, High Edition Viento, love it, still love it, my favorite custom so far.
My commentary basically echoes what Crin just said with regards to the new technology and the bone conduction. But when it comes to custom IEMs, I actually much prefer universals. This might be a little bit controversial, but the reason why I prefer universals is you have an easier time predicting what it's going to sound like. I feel at least, and that makes it easier for me to also the tools for getting it to sound great with EQ are easier and more available with universals. So I prefer, even though I just got some ear molds done, I prefer universals.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see because I obviously I've been in Headfire for a long time, but the back a while ago, the very top of the line in-ears were all customs. And when you were going to spend thousands of dollars on an in-ear, it was a custom. And then now it's really moved to, I think the industry or the community has really moved more toward really high-end universals. As far as bone conduction goes, I've not heard one yet that I'm impressed by, but there's value in bone conduction for another reason. We were talking about this briefly yesterday, some of us. We were testing bone conduction with this new bone conduction simulator long story. And it can be usable for a reference signal to improve like speech quality for outgoing voice and noise canceling and things like that, but I've never heard an example that I would actually want to listen to much as a primary transducer.
Sorry, brief segue. Are you actually using an artificial Westoid for all the bone conduction things?
No, it's Head Acoustics Vibridge, and it uses an EQ'd voice. Well, we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nerd talk. Thanks.
I have a dream that I will have a custom set of IMs, the custom in-ear, that will be true wireless. I think we're at that stage now with the amplification and the bat, especially with the true wireless, which is usually a larger chassis. I feel like you could fit enough in there that if you wanted to do bone conduction in part of it, you could do it internally. That if you wanted to do MEMS drivers, which I got, you didn't get the demo yet. Careful of Michael.
I did. I just haven't got around to it.
Well, I got the demo for like 40 minutes earlier. Hi, Michael. He kept me there forever. But you know what? He explained it, he went over it, and I demoed the double unit, and there is definitely something there that I have not heard in an IM before. But again, if we're going back towards the dream of an actually like high-end true wireless, so I don't want to have to worry about my amp or my DAC, I just put it in my ear and be done with it. But at the level of like, there's MEMS in it, there may be electroset, maybe there's a dynamic in it, because I'm usually a dynamic person, I just only like dynamics. But if you can incorporate all of that into one cavity and then throw it in your ear and have everything, and your DSPs are in there, and you could load other things with firmware, that would probably be the ultimate, just like you own one set, you don't want to hear it today, you change programming and do it tomorrow. So that's a little bit, I know, at least from what I've seen from the market, true wireless are leaps and bounds better than they were 6 months ago, which is leaps and bounds better than they were 18 months ago. So if they integrate that into something like a custom, I think that even like if JH Audio gets out there and puts one out there, I think it would start a whole revolution where people don't want to plug it into anything. Then you're going for the full convenience and best quality.
I forgot to answer the driver question. I agree. EST, the electrostatic tweeters from Sony are interesting, but the really good implementations of that aren't super common yet, at least that I've heard. I know some makers have treated it like a drop-in driver, but the sensitivity is so different from BAs that they have to implement it very carefully. If you want to hear good implementations of it, Visioneers does a really nice job with it, and so does Elysian with the Annihilator. It's probably one of the best implementations of it I've heard.
It's the best name of an IM.
It is. And then the MEMS drivers that they were talking about, I forgot to mention that, can I mention it? I listened to a U-Sound demo and in an in-ear, and then I've listened to XMEMS as well. I do agree with these guys. I think there are some challenges in implementing it. They have certain needs, a lot of voltage, but if you haven't heard the MEMS demos, you should. I'm not sure how public the U-Sound one is. Sorry, Constantine.
You can buy it.
Yeah, can you? You can buy it?
Yeah, no,
I didn't know that. So that was impressive. And then the XMEMS demos out there that you can do. I haven't done with the iFi device yet, but I think the MEMS drivers are very interesting. Very fast. Very fast.
Strings are just like, that's in my ear.
Yeah.
All right, so I think if any of you have went out to scans, obviously we have you've seen there's a lot of amp manufacturers, a lot of stands where there's just selling amps. But let me ask you guys, how much do amps really contribute to the listening experience in your opinion?
Get a Susvara, and then you'll figure that one out pretty quick. That's it can make a big difference.
I've said this controversial opinion many times. I like the Susvara out of the Apple dongle.
This is Apple.
Out of an Apple dongle? Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of the very few who's you know what? If you like to spend a lot of money on amp, go ahead, but I wouldn't. So.
Yeah, no. I'll try it out of the dongle. I'm not optimistic. I'll try it.
I'm a low volume listener. I'm a notorious.
I don't listen very loud either, but yeah.
So, as far as how much amps matter, it's going to really depend on the type of amp and the rest of what's going on. When we're talking about solid state amplifiers, it's I'm not going to reduce it to a percentage, but it's fairly insignificant as long as the headphone's being driven sufficiently. And my sort of, idea behind this is that when we do hear, there are genuine differences that are heard in ABX tests. they would be things that we should expect. But there are also other times where if we have like very obvious differences like tube amplifiers, that can make or break a particular headphone setup. Some people don't necessarily like it out of a solid state amplifier, they hear it on a particular tube amplifier and they go, oh, I actually really quite like it. Or maybe even vice versa. So, but when we're talking about strictly solid state stuff, as long as the headphones has because some headphones are notoriously difficult to drive, like the HE6 and stuff like that. You get it to the loud enough volume and it sounds right. The difference between that and something else is very insignificant to my opinion.
Or if it's quiet enough, if it's a really sensitive in-ear.
Yeah. As soon as you hear noise floor, like that's super audible, right? Like if you like a Campfire Andromeda, right? And that's another thing. If there are output impedance differences and output impedance synergy things, where for example you have headphones that have an impedance bump in a particular region, that's going to make a pretty significant difference for people. So in those cases, it does definitely matter. But that's kind of what I was saying. It's like we would expect that.
I mean, yeah, on that note, even now our esteemed Dr. Sean Olive, he made a mistake of using an amplifier of 30 ohms of output impedance, which kind of screwed over a lot of IEMs.
Your Harman-tuned IEM measured a little bit different in the bass.
I mean, mine is one of them, but if I got part, if he screwed up one of mine, who knows? Like what else?
I gave you bass for free.
Thank you.
My only thing is I think if you have one headphone, you could have maybe 2 amplifiers, 3 amplifiers, a tube, a solid state, and maybe like a Class A, and you'd have at least a little bit of a different experience and everything. But as soon as you have enough headphones if you have enough headphones, and I have enough headphones, I can tell you this much, that you could sit down in front of 10 amplifiers and know that one is not going to work well with another. Or the output impedance, you said, I love own products or on products, and they usually have 10 ohms of output impedance, which can make most things sound bad, but makes some things that magically just sound amazing on it. Class A, I find it like a lot of heavy Class A, things like the Rebel amp, like I mentioned earlier, that really, suck the warmth into it. That's a big difference. And then I've heard amplifiers that just sound boring as hell.
Possible to suck the warmth into something?
Suck the warmth into it. It's a technical term. We'll get to it. But like, if we're going to talk about percentage, things make a difference, and I'm going to get a little bit wider spectrum than this. I'd say the recording quality of what you're listening to makes 60% of the difference. You can listen to terrible music, and it's not going to sound better on anything out there. But so you get that first. And then the headphone is 45%. Wait, that's too much. Okay, no, we're gonna go with 55% source, 35% the actual headphone, and then amp and DAC are just a small little modicum, but it's just enough that if you mix and match them enough, you get that little extra bump, and you're like, okay, now this works.
100% of the time.
100% of the time. 60% of the time, it works 100% of the time.
Yeah, what about the cables?
No.
Hey, we just put out a video proving that it can actually make a difference in very specific niche situations.
Could have told the Trump.
Yeah, well, zero low speeds. Hey, there are IEMs as well that have really low speeds.
I was actually sent, I don't know if you know Viking Weave cable in the UK, Skedra. He sent me a cable to show me that cables make a difference. And he didn't send me a cable that made anything better. He made me a cable that was made out of like tritium and gold. Something terrible. It was terrible. He was like, this will make it worse.
Oh yeah, no, that's not.
That's to prove that a cable makes a difference. So that the normal cable is fine, but you can screw up and have weird impedance along the lines and have the conductor be slightly too thin, and it will ruin the sound. But as long as you're taking half a consideration of something, it should be okay for most things, except for like what you said with like 0.1 ohm. I know I've got the set of the Rawls, and I came with a cable that looks like I could just tie it to a horse and run a horse around the stable with it.
That's what you should do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, so do cables make a difference as far as source gear? What do you guys on like RCAs, XLRs?
Most of mine are the same ones I've had for 8 years.
Yeah.
You gotta use cables from Amazon. $30.
World's best cables.
I just use whatever we have.
Oh, you ready?
Yeah. As long as they're pretty and look and don't fall apart, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. The biggest difference is if you go from like single-ended to XLR, and that's only just for like, let's say, just eliminating the cable noise. If
Or
there's
voltage,
any-
even just to get the higher voltage to go
ground
lower
loop
distance.
Yeah, because my Neumanns like
Your A90 is going to have ground loop issues. If you don't.
exactly. So RCA noise, and XLR clean.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're at the point where 3 out of the 4 of you are using the current up-to-date headphone measurement hardware. And I promise I won't leave you out, Zeos. But only one of you, to my knowledge, maintains a public measurement database.
For now.
Okay, so my question is, for those of you who don't, what is your plan? And for those of you who don't have any measurement rig, when are you gonna get a 5128 Zeos? Gotta upgrade those sound demos, bud.
All right, so this is something that's been like, it's been a bit of a bugbear of mine, that it's more difficult to compare, well, it's very difficult to compare if you don't have, something like Squiglink or a database.
Can use mine. It's open source.
Yeah, well, let me just say, something is in the works, but I can't talk about it, anymore. I can't talk anymore about it. But something's in the works.
Well, did you by any chance catch my seminar yesterday? You did not? Okay, sacrilege. No, anyways, so I'm teasing. But yeah, please leave. But no, I talked a little bit about I have concerns with how we use measurements sometimes and how reviewers use measurements. And I gave some examples. One of them, actually sitting right in front of you, is Axel Grell. He designed the HD800, HD800S, and I used an example of how the measurement is generally presented. I should probably just hook my computer up and show you. But how the measurement is presented when it's just kind of spit out of the analyzer, and how I think it could be presented to be more perceptually relevant. And so one of the things I would like to do, so we are going to release, we've done thousands and thousands of measurements, and we work with most of the companies in there. We even help them do validation measurements for a lot of them. Just before CanJam, we had 3 big validation projects. We've got another one coming up. So I think measurements are extremely valuable. I hope the companies are using them. But when I see how, sometimes I think reviewers review the lines, and depending on how, I'm going to answer the question as best I can. So what happens is, like, for example, as I said in my talk yesterday, which you did not attend, I'm sorry to repeat what I said in my talk for anybody who was there, but if you come to me about, with a measurement of something I know nothing about, video monitors, and you say that this video monitor shows or displays 99.9% of the Adobe sRGB color gamut, right? Then I'm going to take you at your word. I'm going to say that you probably know what you're doing, because I know nothing about how to do that. And so we take the measurer at their word. And I think it happens a lot in our space. So if I show you a comparison of 2 headphones using frequency response, which seems to be what everybody wants to see. One of my pet peeves, like when a new headphone's announced, and the first thing isn't, hey, how does it sound? It's, how does it measure? That bugs me a little bit. So we typically will use noise now, white, yeah. And so to set the level, 80 dB of white noise, but it doesn't necessarily, so you have to understand something. When we show 2 headphones being compared, right? Whenever we measure, we have a standard way of doing it, and you set the level first, either with tone, or in our case, with tone or noise. And then you sweep it, right? You get the sweep. And then they end up somewhere, right? You get a measurement that ends up somewhere, then you get the second measurement when you throw that into compare, and it ends up somewhere. There's nothing that necessarily says that the way it was spit out is perceptually relevant as a comparison. And so if I show it to you, though, you assume that Jude's showing me two measurements, I'm going to assume they're perceptually relevant. Otherwise, why would he show it to me? Why would he show me a comparison that isn't necessarily perceptually relevant? Because how perceptually relevant are you always going to be, or sometimes going to be maybe, when you're using, say, 1 kilohertz at 90 dB SPL to set your level every time? So the one thing I can tell you is that that's the method I use for every measurement I do. They're always going to overlap at 1 kilohertz. Okay, is that necessarily going to make for a perceptually relevant comparison? I don't think it will. And I gave an example of that yesterday in the talk you didn't attend. But with the Sennheiser HD800, HD800S, right, where the way that I think most measurement-focused reviewers would review that headphone today would be very different than the outcome that happened when the 800S came out. And the thing that happened when the 800S came out was that everybody knew that it was a fuller sounding headphone. This was the gimme. I don't think anybody's going to argue the point. It is comparatively a fuller sounding headphone. In fact, when it came out, right, the only measurement guy out there really at the time that was using legit gear was Tile at Inner Fidelity, and so most of us would just listen. And even Tile said, "Oh, it sounds fuller. Why?" And he did this. He gave a reason for it. We disagreed as to what it was. It doesn't matter. The point was, we weren't arguing about the fact that it sounded fuller. Now look at the measurement of the Sennheiser. I mean, I could show it to you if you want me to load it up. It just overlaps the bass from 20 hertz all the way up to about 4.5K, or I don't remember what the exact number is. It directly overlaps. And I think the way most measurement-focused reviewers would review it is to say, yeah, I can show it.
You've given him his power.
Actually, well, you're setting it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen the measurement, and he's going to spend 5 minutes trying to describe it.
Okay, so yeah, while Jude here is loading up the PowerPoint presentation of the century, because you missed it. This is because you missed this thing yesterday, all right? This is your fault.
It's your fault.
As far as I'm concerned with measurements, there is an absolute 100% need for them. Usually in the design phase by the creators of a headphone, or like I've worked with Tacony, and Tacony does pad mods, and they actually bought Till's measurement rig. So when they're measuring for their new pads, they will take a headphone, measure with stock, take a headphone with a new pad, measure it, new pad, measure it, over and over and over again. But the end result does not matter unless you put it on your head and you enjoy it. I had a couple people, the most pissed off I've been is they've come to me like, yeah, I saw that headphones measurements and I didn't buy it because I knew I wouldn't like it. And I'm like, you don't know anything. Measurements don't tell you about soundstage. Measurements don't tell you if a bass drum kick is fast or slow. Like there's other measurements you can do, but it's like reviewing the amount of colors used in the Mona Lisa. They counted them via pixels, and it's like, well, it only has 2.7 million colors. So obviously, it's not the best photo ever painted. It doesn't work like that.
Can I just interject one thing? There are definitely times though when a measurement can tell you something is very wrong.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I have listened to a headphone before and actually looked up the measurements because something was so wrong that I'm like, what?
GL 2000 double sided.
Oh, please, with that controversy, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, but in that case, you detected the error before the measurement.
That's true.
You could easily have just told
Yeah,
me
there's something wrong now in this one compared to this one, but it's very much like comparing like the power graph of a car. If I told you the base weight of a car and a lap time at the Nürburgring and horsepower, and you can see the graph just like that of the power, and I said, do you like this car? What is it? Is it comfortable? Can it hold my golf bags? What is the question? These are questions that you will never get answered with measuring. You have to get in that car. So you got to wear the headphone. You got to come to CanJam.
I have a counterpoint. So, what is the solution to this problem? To you, it's very simple, right? Just listen to the headphone, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But 99% of the people don't have that opportunity.
That's why I sound demo things.
No.
But I'll give you this. I know for a fact how much of a pain it is to sound demo, putting a microphone in a headphone. And then, I'm playing music, not pink noise. So I know when you put a measurement mic in, you do it in how many points do you usually do?
3,000.
But you move the headphone physically, because if I just put a headphone on the microphone, it is not in the right spot.
Yeah.
I have to twist it and move it. And I'm talking about, this is an art, not a science. because I'm listening to a headphone that I know what it sounds like and trying to get it to sound like it sounds and pulling the microphone slightly in or out. And I can just imagine a measuring mic, how many different, it's even planars with the effect that the magnetic field has.
Which is why I say, is that a sound demo is just a graph of extra steps.
Yes, it's a graph you could hear.
Learn to read a graph. Sound demos, not great.
I'm offering an alternative.
They could be great.
So since people seem to be very obsessed with the frequency response plots, and since most of the reviewers, that's what they have available to them, are the frequency response plots, then why not inject some subjectivity into that, which is what I'm talking about here. So this a reviewer could do. And how many of you are familiar with the difference that you hear between an HD800 and HD800S? Please raise your hands. Okay. Would you say that this measurement is more relevant to your perception or this one? It's the same measurement. I just chose to normalize it in a different place that sounded more perceptually relevant to me. I presented this to Axel to ask him, since he designed both headphones, and then there was this whole mystery behind why it had more bass. And I said, I'm presenting this tomorrow. What do you think? He said, yeah, that's it. That's more perceptually relevant to me. Now, these guys might hear it, and Stephen, and say, no, that's not what it sounds like to me. Okay, that's fine. Then if you insist on using a frequency response graph to try to capture what we're hearing, then show me if there's a better comparison than this. That's all I'm saying. Because the reason this is where it is because we typically set the level at 1 kilohertz at 90 dB SPL, say, for example, or this one also matches at 500 hertz at 1 Pascal or something. But it's always going to cross over all of our measurements for any given reviewer, assuming they're using the same method every time. It's always going to cross at that same place. And maybe you'll end up at a place that's more perceptually relevant. So I did this in a couple of videos recently. Here's one. So this is unnormalized. They happen to match at 1K. I used noise to set the levels. This is an expanse. Has anybody here heard the expanse? Has anybody here heard the Mesa Elite? Do you think this is representative of what you hear of the two, or is this more like what you hear? Exactly. That's all I'm saying. The first one for you? Really? But see,
but you know how to read it.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. So that's constantly said. You know how to read it, but when you go to a user, see, to me, this is more perceptually relevant for me. But that's fine, even if you disagree, right? So let's say you say, no, it doesn't sound that much fuller to me. Okay, that's fine, but at least I understand that you've injected your own opinion into this measurement somehow. And I know some of you might have a problem with this method, and that's fine. But at least we're trying something versus just this, let's match it up here all the time. This is the Utopia 2022. How many of you have heard it? How many of you have heard it vis-a-vis the Utopia original? Would you say that this is more relevant to what you hear or this? I would say the second one.
So I have somewhat of a additional, because I agree with what you're saying, but I think this is also why it's crucial that, I don't know if this is working. I think this is why it's also crucial that we have both the measurements and the subjective element. You know, like you did an article on the total technical dichotomy, right? Which is, I mean, it's a little bit different, but there's an element of that in there. Yeah.
I accepted that whatever I talked about technicalities was pseudoscience in a way. And a lot of people, because I am very much intertwined with the objective community, a lot of people call me a charlatan because of that. But I can't deny what I hear. It's like, oh, some headphones do measure the same on frequency response, but they just sound more detailed. And that's snake oil too.
Or better in some way.
Or better in some way. You know, like just a general feeling of, yeah, this is better. But, you know, that's just how how I feel, and that's why I find myself being like, oh, you know, I do measurements, but at the same time, I concern myself, when I write reviews, I'm subjective, absolutely.
But this is also, like, I think the big challenge is how do we represent, to Jude's point, how do we represent data in a way that accommodates different perceptually relevant aspects, right? Like we want to show a frequency response plot against something else. How do we know that everybody's going to hear it, you know, one relative to the other.
But this would be this. I would never assert that this is what everybody is going to hear.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would show the unnormalized, which actually this happens to be the unnormalized using noise as the set, and that's I normalized at 1K just to make it more typical. So if I was using 1K at 90, then it would look more like this. Show the raw output. There you go. That's what it would look like if I was using 1K at 90, and then maybe I would show what I think it sounds more like to me. That's all I'm saying is, so for me, I struggle a little bit. So if I'm going to present any of the measurements, I want to do it in a way that I think is more useful. This is I'm sure a debate we can have, but we also, and I'm so interested in perception. And I wish you would have attended my talk, all kidding aside, because I talk about this, so I don't want to rehash the whole thing.
I wish I attended.
No. I just don't want to rehash it all for everybody because it wouldn't be fair. But I think perception is really an interesting discussion. So we've been evaluating something it's from Head Acoustics. We're still using the 5128 with it, called Multidimensional Audio Quality Score, that takes into account human jury data that Head Acoustics, if you don't know, Head Acoustics specializes in perceptual type measurements. They use human hearing modeling, cochlear modeling, but then it's informed by or combined with juried human survey data. And they decided, they're already the high standard for testing ANC pass-through speech quality. I don't think anybody really would dispute that in the industry. But they decided to take up audio quality now, general audio quality. It doesn't mean that I agree with it all the time. But what I find interesting is, we had this discussion. If you ask me what I like, I just mentioned 2 headphones earlier. The Utopia 2022, and you ask me what would you rate it 1 through 10, and I say 8.5. Love that headphone. HE1's 10. And then you ask, but if I said that the Utopia 2022 I'd rate an 8.5, and then an Atrium I'd also rate an 8.5, then you ask me the question, do they sound the same? And I say, no, not anything alike. I don't think any of you are going to say that that's a weird thing. You're not going to go, oh, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptably weird. I mean, we do that all the time. And I feel like some of the ways we use measurements are so reductive that it doesn't often allow for that. Like say versus a single line target versus range. So until I feel comfortable presenting the measurements that we do, which I work on with so many of those companies out there a lot, almost daily, I will probably not share them until I feel comfortable with that I'm doing it in a way that I find productive, like including the MDAX scores, things like that. Doing something like this, just offering a way to compare, say this is how I hear it, or whatever. If I'm limited to the frequency response, this is how I hear it, this is how Brian hears it, this is how Warren hears it. Maybe then. We're working on a measurement tool now, trying to encompass all the things that we want to do. So
is finding a perceptually relevant by your standards compensation target part of your desire in that?
No. So I know for me it's no. I get what they're trying to do when you're trying to show flat line, because I already have a problem with the one line thing anyway. I find that incredibly reductive. When you start scoring a frequency response against a line, whether it's a reviewer created line or the Harman target, which I think is, as I said yesterday, the most important research of its type that's publicly available. I have no issue with that research at all. In fact, I think it's fantastic. But that line issue is an issue. And so, I shared that yesterday here, showing Oratory 1990 is actually in the audience, by the way. I didn't know he was going to be here, otherwise he'd probably be sitting up here too.
Oh, face reveal.
And he put out this paper or a page and he showed it as boundaries, and that's kind of how I think it is. And so, and then Sean had a discussion where on LinkedIn with a guy named Cedric Bacon, who was a respected engineer, used to be with Bose, now with Meta, and this is absolutely in line with where I'm at. And he said the use of target in the industry has always been a pet peeve of mine. Single lines don't mean much if they're not bounded in J&D and preference degradation. I don't get hung up on the wording choice of target, more the concept of a single line that people have to hit from 20 to 20, otherwise the product is described as poop. At least for the YouTube reviewers, when we all know most small deviations don't have a significant impact on the preference rating. I believe the right thing to do is to evolve this into a design target space beyond the single line. That's more in line with the way I've been thinking for a long time and why I'm just not comfortable putting a whole bunch of single lines out there and to compare to another single line. I have a bit of an issue with that, obviously. And so that's why I don't put that out there yet. We will. We're working on the tool now. And I don't know, and we keep changing, I keep changing the parameters. But we want to probably include, say for example, MDAX data for another. And I'm not going to talk about MDAX now, because it'll take too long. We'll be putting a video out about it, probably a few. Because we're probably going to use it, even though I don't always agree with it. That's the long answer to why.
Thank you so much for the long answer.
Yeah, so I hope that was okay.
I know there's some other questions, but I just want to interject really quickly. How would you guys feel about displaying measurement data in two ways? One, which is essentially, normalized, maybe showing several CDs, whatever, and then another, which is essentially the same, which is what Jude's saying, and editorialized. So that's a perception.
Wait, I feel like that's what I'm doing. Like my I have like compensated and then raw of target. Is that what you're looking at?
Well,
no, he's talking about the boundaries. So
boundaries.
But I think we're both in agreement that the boundaries are a good idea.
We have a different approach in that. So what we're looking at is more like adjustment to slope and boost areas. So we have a default area where it's like tilt to diffuse field. But the level of the tilt and the level of the boost of the bass, which is usually under 200 hertz, is up to user preference. Yeah. So you can make your own target curve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like how we approach the boundary issue, where it's like, well, there's no boundaries if you make the line yourself. Yeah.
But I still think it's worth showing. The boundaries as Oratory has done with the bass. I think that's super relevant. Also because of what's been shown from the Harman research, where there is, there are sort of groupings around the target. So people may have different preferences that are close, but not exactly, at the target. And so when you show a headphone measurement relative to a single line, I think I share the same concern that Jude has about that. And if you use boundaries, that avoids that problem to a certain extent.
I think measurement graphs need more colors.
Excuse me. So I want to move everything away from measurements back to the subjective world. With headphones, when you're reviewing headphones or listening to headphones, it's very easy to swap between headphones and do instant comparisons. What is your preference when you review? To do a long extended, get used to the sound of that headphone, get familiar with it, and then save the comparisons, or do you tend to swap frequently and to do instant comparison to another headphone, or do you, like I said, let it sit for a while and sink in how it sounds, what its signature is?
I'll go with this one first. Hold on. I find with headphones, you ever hear of the blue blocker sunglasses? You won't remember those when old ladies wear them now, right? You put them on, they're orange. And after about 20 minutes or so, everything looks normal through them until you take them off.
Exactly.
And I feel like headphones, IMs, or anything, it's at least a break-in period of your own physical persona of a minimum of 15, more likely 30 minutes of just music playing, or I've even done it with just a test tone where I just listen and then you're sort of normalized, sort of like when you get out of something and you're dizzy and you stabilize. So I find if you go 1-2, 1-2 with a headphone, it's not gonna work quite as well as just listening. I'm not talking about, I know people who have listened for headphones for 4 days straight, then take a 2-day break and listen to something else. I think that's too big a gap. But I think if you're gonna compare headphones, you need at least a 20-minute period before you can actually, which makes it difficult to do at the show here because sitting in a seat for 20 minutes will get you dirty looks. But you usually can't figure out, your brain can't figure out what's happening for at least 10 to 15 minutes. And by 20, you can go, okay, I know what I'm hearing. And then you swap and you wait another 20 minutes. I've done fast switching with amplifiers or a DAC where I can be like, okay, am I hearing a bass bump? But the headphone is consistent. So I think there's at least a minimum of that sort of amount of time. before you can make any sort of judgments?
I think I do have a statement, which is that getting used to gear is the enemy of the reviewer. Because if that happens, everything is good, everything's S tier, then what's the point of actually reviewing anything at all? So what I like to do is that I have a pair of speakers, again the Neumann KH120, not sponsored by the way, but still, it acts as my palette cleanser. I know some other people have like Atimotics as a palette cleanser, or maybe the HD 600s. I like to use speakers. I always go back to the same speakers after a listening session just to renormalize myself as this is ideal for me, just for me, and then go back to listening. And then I don't let myself get acclimatized to whatever that I'm listening to, because if, let's say, the first 5 seconds is the most important part of forming an impression on a product. I know a lot of people say that, oh, it's too short, it's like first impressions. No, it's extremely important, because your brain, like the psychology of your brain, automatically wants to make sure that you are enjoying yourself.
Incredible. Can I ask you one question? What are you listening to in the first 5 seconds? Is it something you know?
Yes.
Do you always do the same song?
Exactly. Every single, or at least the songs that I'm very familiar with. So I can tell the rotation, 3 songs. 3 songs that are in every single one of your SD cards. Hotel California, Hell Freezes Over, Billie Jean, and September. All of which, every single one of you have it, and that's why when someone hands me a DAT, I'm like, you should have at least one of these songs. Yeah, and I just click on it, I know exactly what I'm listening to. So yeah, it also helps, no, it's not even helps, it is imperative that you have a selection of songs that you know inside and out. The moment you use a new, fresh pair of songs, like sometimes on these groups, they like to oh, here's our test playlist. Honestly, I think that's a bit of like a marketing gamble, because you don't know the songs. At that point, you're enjoying the music, which is fine, which is amazing, but you're here for the gear. Let's face it, you're here for the gear, for now. You buy the gear, then you head home and enjoy the music. But when you're evaluating gear, that's when you have to be a bit more objective. You need to use the songs that you're familiar with, know inside and out, every single snare, every single beat, and when something goes wrong, you know. But that's the job of the reviewer. For the regular listener, I guess you can just like sit down, listen, and see what your impressions are. But as a reviewer, again, the enemy of the reviewer is getting used to something new. Because at that point, everything sounds good. Everything sounds amazing. And that's not being sincere to the audience.
It turns out the brain's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
I listen for probably long periods of time, get used to the gear.
Yeah.
And then I make the switch if I'm comparing it. And then depending on what you're trying to do, then you might make rapid switches. So if you're trying to determine which one has more bass or something like that, and it's close.
It's somewhat related to this, but not exactly. I'm currently reading a wonderful paper by Gunter Thiel about psychoacoustics, and it's amazing what the brain does. Or it's not really about psychoacoustics, but it's fascinating what the brain does, and how even something as simple as like localization can sound super normal, even though the frequency response at the eardrum might be totally different depending on where a sound source is. And it's because we are able to recognize that the sound source is moved. And so even though the frequency response is totally different, our brain is sort of making that adjustment, subconsciously or unconsciously. And it's pretty wild.
Okay, so my question is about credibility. So if you have 2 theoretical listeners, listener A and listener B, and listener A has never heard any hi-fi equipment, has never listened to any hi-fi system ever, and listener B has, infinite money, has listened to everything, and has spent like enough time to have a complete, total grasp of the entire industry. At what point from between point A and point B do you think that like a reviewer has sufficient credibility to be a voice of reason within the community?
So is this kind of like trained versus untrained, and like what the requirements
Yeah,
are
I mean,
for?
just for me personally as an independent reviewer, like I don't have, I'm not attached to a commercial institution, so
myself, I don't have the luxury of like A being everything to everything else. And so, to an extent, I have to rely on my own, hearing and ability without comparing things necessarily to hear like an absolute sound signature.
I think your question is probably one more of experience than it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think as long as you have familiarity with a lot of the stuff that, like, anybody can be a reviewer. Like, anybody's opinion is valuable. But it helps, I think, if people have some frame of reference that's shared. So at least you can say, okay, I've heard the HD600, and relative to that somebody else may have heard, that a lot of people may have heard, this thing sounds like this, or something like that, I think is helpful at least.
I think it's like, for the beginning, I've been doing this now, my channel is going to 10 years for the first review in May. And it was very much fake it till you make it. Because I was like, I like this headphone. I had heard 3 headphones. And then I heard 5 headphones. And then I heard 22 headphones. And now I think if I go to my Patreon and I go to like add the headphone tag, I'm over 300. And some of those were groups. So having just experienced everything, does it give me a broader perspective to compare? Sure. But I'm still in there. What I like still matters more than what the headphone sounds like. If there's a headphone with no low end at all, I can objectively say, okay, everything else about this is good, but I personally don't like it. You always have to separate what you think everyone wants and what you want. And that's something you're not going to figure out until you've gotten 30, 40 headphones where you've spent more than 10 hours on each of them. And then you can be like, all right, I really know what I don't like, I know what I do like, and I've talked to my friends, talked to the people who are using these headphones. Do they like something consistently about it, or don't like something? So yeah, experience is, all you can do is compare to what you have, and just as long as people know that that's what you're basing everything off of, you're fine. You're not lying to anyone, you're not being misleading. You just have to be like, I have this, and I like this one better. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter the price range. Just be honest with it. Always just be honest. And you'll know when you've heard everything or close to everything, that you could be like, okay, no. I picked up, that's why when they asked about the Yamaha, and I'm like, no. It's like, it's not there yet. We're not quite there yet. So I could say that with pretty much confidence. If that was at the 3rd headphone I've ever heard in the world, I have no way to put it down the way I have. But I've heard all the other $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 headphones. So I can do that. I have the confidence in myself to do that. You just need to build the confidence yourself. Just borrow people's headphones. Come to these shows, go to meets. Edfi has a bunch of meets planned. I went to the one in Philly like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and just play with other people's gear. And once you have a knowledge base of yourself, you can do anything you like.
I have a question that's related to that. So, do you think that there are people who will listen to, who will think that they enjoy something based on the confidence that they've received from something being heralded as excellent by other people, or being objectively perfect, or deemed like, for whatever reason.
Confirmation bias?
Yeah, say they get confidence from somewhere else, and then do you think that overrides or somehow influences their own actual enjoyment? They're not being honest with themselves.
I'd like to point to the example of the Audio-Technica M50, which I believe several years ago everyone loved, and then I think that was my first review where I was like, you know what? I got these, and I have to be honest, I don't like them. And then I can remember in the comments, every other comment was like, I have these, and I don't think I like them either. I feel like I was like, they were like, you know what, these suck, these are terrible to listen to, and I'm like, I guess I did that, because it's just, everyone was in the hype of them, and then no one was objectively listening. They just believe this. If you tell someone this is good, and you give it to them, and everyone gets it, and they're like, this is good, well, I guess this is good. Everyone has to have at least in their own head, they have to have a doubt that something is, it's up to them to have a doubt. If you go into something just like, this is great because this guy said it, you're going to be happy, probably, but you may end up with that Audio-Technica M50Xs, and then that's the worst, that's the worst
but if you enjoy them, that's okay.
But then you might want to try these, and then I'm the one that steps in and let you try these.
Okay, guys, I gotta pause here for a moment. We're technically past 4 o'clock. I don't know if you guys have any meetings or any places where you have to be, but if you don't, would you mind staying a little longer?
I'll stay for another question. I have to get out there.
Yeah, no, I do know we have more questions. So, two more? Can we get two? Two more, okay, two more.
DAPs. We have dual DAC chips, we have replaceable amps, we have ports galore. I'm curious from your perspective if there's something that the innovation hasn't hit yet. Is there anything that you've just been like thinking in your head that why haven't they done this yet? This is my first time at CanJam and I brought my DAP and I don't know how you could really start listening to various headphones and amps without knowing your own music beforehand. Is there something missing to bring DAPs into the next stage?
Like the portable players?
Correct, yes.
I mean, I think they need to be faster. The SP3000 is really, really fast, which was kind of a revelation. But because I don't know that they have access to all the fancy chips that the phone companies have, but Aston Current, if you use their SP3000, is super snappy. I like they did one with a tube circuit, which is really fun because you can mix how much tube you want in, whether it's all tube or all op amp. But I mean, it's a pretty advanced market. I mean, you know, as these independent companies go, these DAPs are pretty advanced. As far as the DAC chip goes, I don't pay attention to what DAC chip's in it. I can't even remember all the letters and numbers, and so I just use them. If I like it, then yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've like 8 of them I've reviewed in the last 3 months. And DAC chip maybe matters, doesn't matter. Amplifier technology matters, doesn't matter. Depends on what you're going for also. If you're only gonna play IEMs, if you have a 1/4 of a watt, you're good. If you're coming here, you're gonna need something with a watt to really get out there. If you wanted to plug, you know, Utopia in it and get it at the correct level. If you're trying to bring a desktop amp portable, there are units for that. I know Quolos had literally one that was the size of like a cable box and you could just put it in your bag. It was battery powered. But as far as technology goes, I actually prefer, there was Shanling had the new H7, which was just, it took an SD card and your phone just controlled what was playing on it. So I didn't need to I got this huge honking thing just away and then control it here. Unfortunately, the app sucked. So it would like disconnect constantly, but I like that feature set of like, just give me a big honking battery and amplifier and let me control it on my phone, which I'm gonna have in my hand usually most of the time anyway. So that was like the biggest step. I just wish they would straighten out the app. Because then my phone is as fast as my phone is and it could read off it and do everything. Because actually pulling out, like I brought 2 DAPs and I just ended up with a dongle on my phone because my phone's faster. And I'm gonna get, you know, half as much power, but I don't have to carry around 2 bulking devices with screens. So I think screenless DAPs are gonna be the future. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see something just a honk that you plug your phone into and then you connect Bluetooth to control it.
That's a dongle.
Or a QX
Yeah.
5K.
A dongle without, a wireless dongle. I want a wireless dongle essentially.
So BTR5.
Or a QX 5K.
7.
Well, BTR5, no Bluetooth. No Bluetooth. If it has the data stored on it and you're just controlling what it's playing. That's my go-to. If I can get it working, which is only like 2 that do that right now, that would be the ultimate.
I think that the DAPs need to catch up to the some of the other devices out there that have the oratory EQ presets on them. And the Crin as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't use DAPs anymore because I realized that dongles can get like really close to at least a mid-tier DAP, because I know the high-tier DAPs are like really powerful, but at the same time they are bricks. So you're not gonna bring them out, or at least if you're gonna bring them out, it's gonna be like very, very specialized events like these. But I'm pretty sure that almost every other time you're gonna be using a dongle, or at least like a really powerful one, like a small-ish one that looks brick-ish but just fits in your pocket, right? You're not gonna shove a DAP like the SP, like a CanQ into your pocket. That's terrible. What?
Use them for $150.
That's good.
That's my go-to. It's like
and now dongles are getting more and more powerful. I remember like Periodic Audio just like told me like they're working on something that could output like 1 watt.
Why? In a dongle? Drawing off the phone, or has it internal battery?
No, it's just like it's like it has really a power dense chip or something. I don't know. You talk to the Periodic guys and get on that.
Your phone immediately dies.
Anything else?
Alright, so this is to Zeos. For your for your reviews, have you ever faced any backlash from companies where their products being featured next to your near anime characters? It's just a small question.
I've had a couple of reviews where I've had to like email companies back and be like, "It's done," and then I just leave the room. Never negative. Companies are actually way more forgiving with a product. I don't know if you guys could chime in on this too. Have you ever given a review for something that has just the company's angry at you and come back? I know one of the worst products I've ever reviewed was sent to me by Sony. And it was like, oh, good, Sony, I'm finally going to get stuff sent to me by Sony. And it was their neck speaker. They decided that that was what they were going to send me. And it had like the slots and it was like shooting up and it was god awful. And I put the review out, full tilt. And then my girlfriend was doing my emails at the time and she's like, I'm going to send this to them because they wanted the video. And she just sent it and we never heard from Sony again. So I guess that's just the cold shoulder methodology. But you know, that's... Please don't send me neck speakers if they're terrible.
This question is related to the last question, but how do you handle not being too positive or too critical in your reviews? You want to be as objective as possible, but I think you have to balance a little bit.
Define too critical.
Too critical meaning the companies don't ever want to send you review units.
Oh, I don't care. Yeah, like who cares? I don't think there's such a thing as being too critical. So I'm saying like, you know, if something really is bad, just say it's bad. Don't sugarcoat things.
There's enough of a backlog anyway.
I know, so there's enough of a backlog. And yeah, I mean, I admit that nowadays there's going to be a bit of a positive selection bias because, too many things in the backlog. Therefore, now I'm kind of selecting the things I'm like, oh, this is interesting that some people might like. But I'm trying to get back into the fray where I'm starting to, you know, talk bad about some products because some of them really require that bit of too criticalness.
There's definitely been times when I am worried and there's been times where, you know, there's been maybe less than fun conversations after a particularly negative or critical review. But there's also been times when you think that, oh no, this is going to be, you know, there's going to be some backlash and you know, the brand or manufacturer's so thrilled that you gave that, you know, critical feedback, you know, and they're like, oh, thank you for pointing this out. I hadn't thought about this, and so sometimes they're extremely, you know, receptive to that. So I think you can just be honest, right? You can be as just truthful and honest as possible, and and then everybody wins.
I don't really do many reviews, and I don't like getting on camera at all. So I tend to review only what I'm impressed by. And so some people think that Jude likes everything he hears, but you can imagine how much stuff comes through Headphone HQ. And then you look at how prolific I'm not. And if you believe that's everything I've heard, well, then I guess you believe that that's everything I've heard. But I never lie about anything I hear. If you guys think that you hear it differently, you can always say so. If you think I'm hearing it wrong, you can always say that as well. But I understand that given the fact that I own a website and a show for which people pay me to advertise or exhibit, if you can't get past that, I understand actually. I will tell you now, I will never lie to you. And I've gotten some reviews wrong where I look back at it, maybe my tastes have changed. But if you can't get past that, I completely understand. There is a conflict of interest. That's unavoidable. But I won't lie to you, but you may choose not to believe me. And again, I completely respect that. So, yeah, I don't like everything I hear. Again, if you think that how many reviews have I done? Like 2, 3 in the last year or something? I don't even know right now, if you don't include the preview videos, which are promotional. I love the comments that we see sometimes that are like, this is just a big ad. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's a preview video for a show. I mean, we're promoting the show. But even then, we try to focus on the products we like, right? That we hear, that companies send, that we say, okay, people might like this at the show. But again, I understand completely. If you're like, he makes money from the advertising and from the exhibitors, and for that, I cannot believe anything he says, or I'll take none of that as his honest word. I understand it, and that's your choice, but I wouldn't lie to you. And I don't like everything I hear.
I guess I'm going to reiterate a little bit of that, where it's that I want to like everything. This is a fun job. Audio is great. You're all here to listen to music. It's a good time. I only get upset at something when it disappoints me or hurts me physically. I've had a couple things that are literally have either tried to take my hearing from me or tried to cut my hands open, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna just destroy this. And I'm never worried about like ruining a relationship with a company. Like I destroyed Sony's relationship with me, although they'll probably forget by now, right? They have short memories. Big companies have short memories when you have like 250,000 subscribers. They're like, all right, try them again. But the biggest thing is with always be honest, especially with yourself, because it's like you could lie. I could lie once, and I could, you know, again, talking about making money with this. Click a link in the description. I make a percentage. But if I lie to you, you don't come back the next time. But if I'm completely honest, or I give you an alternative, like this thing sucks. And really, but then the people claim to me like, oh, you love everything, because I do have a positive outlook on every product that's out there. I want it to play music to me and entertain me. So if it does it and it's just okay, you really kind of have to get into the groove of, especially for my channel, like, is Zeos happy? Or is he just like okay with this?
Is Zeos okay?
Is Zeos okay? When I'm on to something, when I am on it, you know, I am animated as hell. And companies honestly don't care. I don't think companies cared ever if I've given like a bad review, a good review. I really liked when people were sending in their stuff, like, hey, I bought this, do you want to review it? And sometimes they would send it to me knowing it's terrible, but I wouldn't know it's terrible. Which is like, why would, this is terrible. So you've subjected me to like 5 hours of my life. I had to like figure out why this is the worst thing ever. So I'm kind of angry going into the review. So I mean, I'll have my extreme highs and my extreme lows, but on the average, it's like, I'm enjoying music. I'm just sitting here enjoying music. So it doesn't really affect me unless it's a complete ripoff or, again, pain and danger. Pain and danger bad.
Okay, guys, we're way over. I happen to know they're going to be on the show floor, so you can stalk them after we get out of here. But with that said, let's thank our panel. And thank you guys for